The dark, cold planet of Calthar lay ahead, a place known for its rocky terrain and dangerous wildlife. It was the perfect place to hide stolen technology. Captain Drew Harper, a skilled human scout, was here on a mission. He had been sent by the Human Galactic Command to retrieve some high-tech equipment that had gone missing. The tech was too important to fall into enemy hands, and Drew was the best at tracking it down. His ship, a sleek, silver model that could cut through the vastness of space, landed on the barren surface of Calthar. Drew took a deep breath as he prepared to exit the ship. His mission wasn't going to be easy. The stolen tech had been taken by a group of Zolothans, an alien race known for their ruthlessness. They had been a growing threat to the humans for years. But Drew wasn't worried. He'd faced worse, and he always found a way to get the job done. He grabbed his laser rifle and his trusty plasma blade. He had to find the tech, and the Zolothans would pay if they tried to stop him. As he moved through the rocky landscape, the wind howled around him, and the ground was dry and cracked. There was no sign of the enemy yet, but Drew knew that would change soon. His instincts told him he wasn't alone. Suddenly, a noise broke the silence. A low hum, followed by a soft click. Drew dropped to one knee, his hand on the grip of his rifle. A Xylothan soldier appeared, a tall figure with greenish skin and sharp angular features. The soldier was dressed in black armor and moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had done this many times before. But Drew had trained for this. He could hear his enemy's every step, feel the vibrations in the ground. He waited. A loud snap echoed through the air, and the Xylothan soldier fell to the ground, paralyzed by a stun blast from Drew's rifle. Without hesitation, Drew moved forward, searching for any sign of where the stolen tech might be. That's when he heard it, a soft laugh. Drew spun around, his weapon raised, but he saw nothing at first. Then, out from behind a rock, stepped the most unexpected sight. A woman. She was tall and athletic, with silver hair and striking blue eyes. She wore tight, dark armor, and a small weapon was holstered on her belt. She didn't look like any ordinary soldier, and Drew instantly knew she wasn't human. "Not bad, human," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You've taken down my soldier, but don't think that means you've won." Drew narrowed his eyes. "Who are you?" The woman smirked. "I'm Arlexa, and I was just about to ask the same thing. You've got guts to come here alone, but let's see if you can handle me." Before Drew could react, she vanished in a blur, moving faster than he could track. Her form appeared again, this time behind him, aiming a sleek, silver blade directly at his back. Drew barely had time to twist around and block the strike with his plasma blade. Sparks flew as their weapons collided. "You're quick," Drew said, his eyes locked onto hers, "but you're not fast enough." She laughed again, a musical sound that somehow made the danger feel even more real. "I'm not just quick. I'm smarter than you two, and you'll find that out soon enough." Drew could feel the challenge in her words. This wasn't going to be an easy fight. Arlexa wasn't just some random soldier. She was trained, cunning, and dangerous. But Drew had his own skills. He had learned to think on his feet and adapt to any situation. "All right, let's see if you're really as good as you say you are," Drew said, narrowing his eyes. Arlexa moved again, faster this time, and Drew felt the heat of her blade as it narrowly missed his arm. He quickly countered with a swift strike, aiming for her midsection. But she was already gone, reappearing several feet away, a smirk still on her face. "You humans are all the same," she taunted, full of bravado, but no real strategy. Drew didn't answer. He had no time for talk. Instead, he focused. The fight wasn't about strength. It was about outsmarting her. He needed to use his environment. As Arlexa lunged at him again, Drew ducked and slid behind a large rock. For a moment, there was silence. He could hear her moving around, trying to locate him, but he stayed still, his breath steady. Then he heard the sound he'd been waiting for, Arlexa's footsteps growing faint as she started to circle the rock. Drew grinned. He was ready. As she rounded the corner, Drew jumped up, catching her by surprise. He quickly knocked the blade from her hand with a swift move of his plasma blade. Arlexa stumbled back, her eyes wide with shock. "You're not the only one who can be smart," Drew said, his voice calm but filled with determination. For a moment, Arlexa was silent, staring at him. Then, with a heavy sigh, she lowered her hands in surrender. You're better than I thought," she said, a reluctant admiration in her voice. Drew kept his weapon trained on her. "I don't know if that's a compliment or an insult. But why are you here, Arlexa? What do you want?" Arlexa's eyes flickered with something that might have been hesitation. "I'm here because, well, I suppose you could say I've been sent to stop you." Drew raised an eyebrow. "Stop me? From retrieving stolen tech?" She nodded. "You're after something that doesn't belong to you, and I'm not going to let that happen." "Funny," Drew said, "because I was just about to say the same thing to you." Arlexa took a step back, looking at him curiously. "What are you talking about?" Drew's eyes narrowed. "I know who you are, Arlexa. You're not just some mercenary. You're the leader of a Zilathan bounty hunter group. You've been hunting humans, taking what's not yours. And now you've made a mistake by crossing me." Arlexa's face hardened, but there was a flicker of something else in her eyes, something like fear. It was gone too quickly for Drew to be sure, but it was enough to make him press forward. "Listen, Arlexa," he said, "you've got two choices. You can fight me to the death, or you can do what's right. You can hand over the stolen tech, and we can both walk away from this. But if you keep standing in my way, I'll make sure you regret it." The Zilathan woman stared at him for a long moment. Then, with a resigned sigh, she spoke again. "No more tricks, human," she said, her voice heavy with emotion. "You've beaten me. By the laws of my people, I owe you my servitude. For life." Drew blinked, unsure if he had heard her correctly. "What?" Arlexa dropped her weapon to the ground and knelt. "I swear it. I am yours to command. I owe you my life." Drew shook his head, unsure of what to say. "This wasn't part of the plan. I didn't ask for your servitude." She looked up at him, determination in her eyes. "It doesn't matter. It's the law. You've defeated me, and now I am bound to you." For a moment, Drew stood still, trying to process everything. What was happening here? He didn't know whether to laugh or be suspicious. But one thing was clear. Things had just gotten a whole lot more complicated. "All right then," Drew finally said, a small smirk tugging at his lips. "I'll keep you to that promise. But don't think for a second that I'm going to make things easy for you." Arlexa simply smiled, standing up and brushing the dust off her armor. "I wouldn't expect anything less. After the strange encounter on the rocky planet of Kalthar, things started to settle down. Well, sort of. Drew Harper, the human scout who had just outwitted an elite alien, Arlexa, found himself facing a problem he never expected. The Zilathan woman had sworn herself to his service, and according to her, that wasn't just a passing promise. No, it was a lifelong vow that she was bound to honor. And now, Drew had no choice but to figure out how to handle this unexpected situation. Back aboard Drew's ship, which was now soaring through the stars on its way back to human-controlled space, the two of them sat across from each other in the small dining area. Drew leaned back in his seat, rubbing his temples, trying to make sense of what was happening. Arlexa sat across from him, her posture stiff, but her expression unreadable. For a moment, there was silence. The hum of the ship's engines filled the space between them. Drew broke the silence first. "So, you're really serious about this whole servitude thing, huh?" Drew asked, leaning forward and looking at her with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Arlexa didn't look up. "I told you. It's the law of my people. I cannot break my oath without facing consequences I would rather avoid." Drew shook his head in disbelief. "I don't need a servant. I don't even know how to have one. What am I supposed to do with you? Arlexa gave him a small, almost reluctant smile. That is not my problem, human. I am bound to you now. My life is yours to command. You just have to tell me what you wish. Drew sighed, rubbing his forehead again. All right. I get it, but I'm not exactly prepared to have an alien in my crew, especially one who's sworn to serve me. Arlexa's eyes narrowed, her smile fading. I don't need your sympathy, human. I'm not here for your pity. I'm here because of my oath, and I intend to follow it. You just need to give me orders. Drew glanced at her, still unsure of what to make of the whole situation. But then an idea started to form in his mind. Maybe, just maybe, this could work out. Okay, Drew said slowly, let's start simple. You can help me with the basic tasks on the ship. I don't need anything fancy, but it'll give you something to do. He shrugged. Maybe you can make yourself useful. Arlexa didn't respond right away. She simply looked at him, her expression unreadable. Finally, after a long pause, she spoke, her voice steady. Very well. But understand this. My skills are not just for menial tasks. I am trained in combat, in stealth, in tactics. I can be much more than a mere servant. Drew raised an eyebrow. We'll get to that when we need it. For now, let's just keep things simple. And so the strange arrangement began. At first, it wasn't so bad. Arlexa helped around the ship, keeping the engine running smoothly, handling minor repairs, and even cooking meals, though, admittedly, her cooking skills were questionable at best. Drew learned quickly that Arlexa had a unique approach to preparing food. The first meal she served him was a thick, green stew with an odd, sour smell. When Drew tried it, he immediately regretted it. Ah, Arlexa, he said, his face scrunched in disgust. This is something else. What exactly is this supposed to be? She looked at him, unblinking. It is a traditional dish from my home planet. It is nutritious. Drew struggled to swallow another bite, his face turning slightly green. Right. Maybe next time, stick to something a little less alien. Arlexa didn't seem offended. Instead, she nodded and returned to her task, cleaning up the kitchen area. Drew, still trying to recover from the strange meal, couldn't help but chuckle to himself. This was going to take some getting used to. The first real test. A few days later, as they neared the edge of known space, things took a turn for the worse. Drew received a distress signal from a nearby outpost, a remote human colony on a small planet, Zoria. The signal was faint and filled with static, but it was clear enough to make out one word: attack. Drew immediately set the ship's course for Zoria. Arlexa, who had been quietly monitoring the ship's systems, raised an eyebrow. You plan to help them? She asked, her tone cautious. I assume this is not your responsibility. Drew nodded, his face grim. It's the right thing to do. If someone's in trouble, we help. That's how it works. Arlexa crossed her arms. You humans, always so eager to rush in and play the hero. Drew smirked, leaning back in his chair. Hey, someone's got to do it. Might as well be me. Arlexa didn't say anything else, but Drew could see a flicker of something in her eyes. He wasn't sure what it was, but it made him feel like she was trying to understand him. Or maybe she was just observing, waiting to see what he would do next. When they arrived at Zoria, the situation was worse than they expected. The small colony was under attack by a band of rogue Xylothan mercenaries, the same group that had likely stolen the human tech earlier. Drew's instincts kicked in immediately. All right, we're going in, Drew said, standing up from his seat. Get your gear ready. We'll land in the clearing near the outskirts of the colony. Arlexa followed him without a word, her expression hardening. There was no hesitation in her movements. She was a trained fighter, and Drew had no doubt she was ready for whatever they were about to face. A different kind of partnership. The ground of Zoria was rocky, with large patches of grass swaying in the wind. The colony's buildings were simple, yet functional, made of local materials that were strong but not prepared for a full-scale attack. As Drew and Arlexa approached the settlement, they saw smoke rising from a few of the structures. The mercenaries were already causing chaos. "We'll have to move fast," Drew said. "You take the left side. I'll handle the right. We need to clear the area and rescue anyone who might be trapped." Arlexa nodded, a brief look of respect passing between them. "Understood." They moved into position quickly, taking down a few mercenaries along the way. Drew's quick thinking and tactical planning combined with Arlexa's skills made them a deadly duo. Drew would create distractions, drawing enemies into ambushes, while Arlexa used her speed and agility to take them out silently. The battle was intense, but with each passing minute, Drew could feel the bond between them growing stronger. Arlexa wasn't just some alien servant anymore. She was a partner. She was loyal, efficient, and incredibly skilled. Drew couldn't help but admire her. As they cleared the last of the mercenaries from the area, they reached a group of frightened colony members, huddled behind a building. They looked at Drew and Arlexa in confusion and fear. "You're safe now," Drew said, offering a reassuring smile. "We'll get you to the transport and get you out of here." Arlexa stepped forward, offering her assistance with calm efficiency. She didn't seem to mind getting her hands dirty or being in the thick of things. She acted like a true warrior, not a servant. Drew had to admit, this partnership was starting to feel more like an alliance than anything else. An unexpected truth. After the battle was over and the survivors were safely evacuated, Drew and Arlexa stood outside the colony, catching their breath. Arlexa had a small cut on her cheek, but she didn't seem bothered by it. Drew, on the other hand, was feeling the strain of the battle, but there was something else weighing on his mind. "You know, I've been thinking," Drew said, looking over at her, "about this whole servant thing." Arlexa turned her gaze to him, her eyes steady. "And what are you thinking, human?" Drew hesitated for a moment. "I don't think of you as a servant anymore, Arlexa. You're a partner. You saved those people today, and I owe you for that." Arlexa's face softened slightly, a rare flicker of emotion crossing her features. "Perhaps you're not as foolish as I thought." Drew smiled, shaking his head. "Maybe not, but this whole servitude thing, it's not going to work the way you think. You're not here to serve me, Arlexa. You're here to fight alongside me. And that's what I want from you." Arlexa didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at him for a long time, considering his words. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but sincere. "Then, perhaps we can find a different way to do this. I will follow your lead, human, but only if we fight days past since Drew and Arlexa's fight to defend the Zoria colony." The attack had been fierce, but with their combined efforts, they had managed to drive the Zilethan mercenaries away and save the survivors. For Drew, it had been an eye-opening experience. Arlexa, the Zilethan woman who had sworn herself to his service, had proven to be far more than just a servant. She was a capable fighter, a skilled strategist, and, despite their differences, a valuable ally. Back aboard their ship, the Starlight, the two of them had settled into a strange but effective routine. Drew handled the navigation, communication, and strategy, while Arlexa took care of repairs, maintenance, and any physical tasks that needed doing. Their relationship, once tense and uncertain, had begun to change. There was still a certain distance between them. Arlexa's cold, alien nature never quite disappeared, but over time, they started to trust each other more. One evening, as they flew through the darkness of space, Drew stood at the control panel, eyes focused on the star map in front of him. They were headed toward Vera Station, a key outpost on the edge of human-controlled space, where they would hopefully find more information about the stolen tech that had been the original reason for Drew's mission. As he adjusted their course, he felt a presence behind him and turned to see Arlexa standing in the doorway, her arms crossed. "I've been thinking," Arlexa said, her voice cool but softer than usual. Drew raised an eyebrow. Oh, should I be worried? Arlexa's eyes glinted with a hint of amusement, but her face remained serious. I'm not here to cause trouble, human. But I think it's time we had a discussion about our arrangement. Drew leaned back in his chair, looking up at her. What kind of discussion? I thought we were working well together. What's the problem? Arlexa took a step forward, her gaze never leaving his. I don't like the way you see me. You've been treating me like a partner, but you still hold on to the idea that I'm here to serve you. You don't trust me completely. Not really. Drew's brow furrowed. What do you mean? You're helping me. That's all I need. Arlexa shook her head. It's not enough. You've seen what I can do. You know I'm not just a servant. I'm not just a tool for you to use. But you still hesitate to fully trust me. Drew sighed, looking at her seriously now. I can trust easily, Arlexa. I'm not used to having people, well, aliens, around who might have their own agenda. But I'm getting there. Slowly. Arlexa didn't say anything for a long moment. Instead, she moved to the window, gazing out at the stars. The silence between them stretched, but Drew could feel a shift in the air. It wasn't just about trust anymore. It was something deeper. Arlexa had given him her loyalty, but he hadn't fully returned it. Finally, Arlexa spoke again, her voice softer this time. I didn't choose to be bound to you, human. But now that I am, I will not fail you. But if you want me to fight alongside you, to truly be your partner, you need to let go of your hesitation. Drew stood up and walked toward her, his mind racing. What did he want from Arlexa? She had proven herself time and time again. She was loyal, skilled, and capable. Yet there was always that nagging doubt in the back of his mind, the thought that maybe, just maybe, she had an agenda of her own. But the way she spoke now, the honesty in her words, it made him wonder if he was holding on to something that was keeping them both from fully trusting each other. Maybe it wasn't about Arlexa's loyalty after all. Maybe it was his own fear that was standing in the way. I don't know how to fully trust you, Arlexa, Drew admitted, his voice quieter than usual. But I do know this. You've got my back. And I've got yours. Arlexa turned to face him, her eyes searching his face as if looking for any sign of doubt. But there was none. Drew stood tall, steady, and unwavering. It was the first time he had truly meant it. Then that's all I need, Arlexa said, her tone firm but not unkind. We'll be ready for whatever comes next. The threat on Vera Station. As their ship drew closer to Vera Station, Drew felt a strange sense of calm. The tension between him and Arlexa had lessened, but there was still a lot to figure out. They had been traveling together for weeks now, and it seemed like every day they learned something new about each other. Vera Station was a key hub for human military operations, and it wasn't far from the edge of known space. Drew had heard rumors about the station being under attack by a mysterious force, but he wasn't sure if those rumors were true. Either way, they had to stop there for supplies and information before continuing their search for the stolen tech. As they docked at the station, Drew quickly realized that the rumors were, unfortunately, true. The station was in disarray. A large portion of the station's docking area was blocked off by debris, and there was an eerie silence in the air. Drew and Arlexa immediately suited up in their combat gear and stepped out onto the station's cold metal floors. The station's crew was scattered, and there was no sign of any serious military presence. This wasn't the type of place Drew had expected to find in a hub of human defense. Stay alert, Drew said quietly as they moved through the corridors. We don't know what we're walking into. As they made their way deeper into the station, the power flickered, and the station's lights dimmed. Drew reached for his rifle, his senses heightened. Something was definitely off. Suddenly, a voice crackled over the station's intercom. It was a low, almost guttural voice, distorted by static. You are too late, human. The tech is already ours. Drew's hand tightened around his rifle. This was it, the stolen tech. The voice was unmistakable. It belonged to Kale, the leader of the rogue Xylathan mercenaries. They had been one step ahead of him the whole time. "We've got company," Drew muttered. "Stay close." They moved forward cautiously, making their way to the station's control center. They could hear the sounds of footsteps and voices echoing through the halls. As they approached the control center, Drew spotted several mercenaries patrolling the area. "How do you want to handle this?" Arlexa asked, her voice steady. Drew hesitated for a moment. "We take them out silently. We need to keep things quiet until we find the tech." Arlexa nodded, her movements fluid as she disappeared into the shadows. Drew followed suit, and within moments, they had neutralized the guards without a sound. The closer they got to the control center, the more intense the tension became. Drew's heart raced as they moved past locked doors and into the heart of the station. He could feel the presence of the mercenaries, but he also felt something else, the weight of the promise he had made to Arlexa. They were in this together now. They had each other's backs. When they finally reached the control center, Drew quickly disabled the security system, allowing them access. Inside, a small group of mercenaries were gathered around a console, trying to crack the encryption on the stolen tech. "Move," Drew shouted, bursting into the room with Arlexa right behind him. The mercenaries turned in shock, but it was too late. Drew's rifle fired first, taking down one of the attackers with a precision shot. Arlexa moved like lightning, disarming another mercenary with a swift kick and knocking him out cold. The remaining mercenaries were no match for them. In a matter of seconds, the threat was neutralized. As Drew approached the console, he saw the tech they had been searching for. The familiar blueprints flashed on the screen in front of him, confirming their success. "You did it," Arlexa said, her voice steady. "We did it." Drew smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment wash over him. "Yeah, we did. A new beginning." With the stolen tech secured, Drew and Arlexa made their way back to the ship. The mission wasn't over yet. They still had to get the tech back to Human Galactic Command. But for now, they had accomplished what they set out to do. As they flew away from Vera Station, Drew looked at Arlexa, feeling a new sense of respect for her. She wasn't just a servant anymore. She was a partner, someone he could rely on. And maybe, just maybe, he had found something more in her than he had ever expected. The stars outside the ship were endless, and Drew couldn't help but feel that this was only the beginning. Whatever came next, he knew they would face it together. After securing the stolen tech from the Zilathan mercenaries, Drew and Arlexa continued their journey through space. The mission was far from over, but the bond between the two had grown stronger. What had begun as a reluctant partnership between a human and an alien servant had evolved into something deeper, an alliance. They weren't just working together anymore. They were fighting side by side, each relying on the other's strengths, sharing goals, and trusting each other in ways neither had expected. The starlight sped through the endless expanse of space, heading toward the nearest Human Galactic Command outpost. Drew sat at the ship's control panel, guiding them through the quiet void, his mind working over the next steps. The stolen tech they had retrieved was of immense value. Whoever controlled it could control entire star systems, and the last thing Drew wanted was for it to fall into the wrong hands. But the tech was only one part of the equation. There was a larger web of intrigue behind the mercenaries' attack, one that involved powerful factions and dangerous players, many of whom might be closer to home than Drew realized. He glanced over at Arlexa, who was sitting across the room, silently observing the data streaming across the holographic screens. She had been more quiet than usual since their mission on Vera Station, but Drew knew that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. In fact, her silence meant she was focused. Arlexa always seemed to think things through before speaking, and Drew had come to respect her for it. She was sharp, observant, and reliable in ways that made her more of an asset than he had ever imagined when their paths first crossed. "Arlexa," Drew said, breaking the silence. "I've been thinking." Arlexa didn't turn to him, but her ears twitched slightly, a sign she was listening. "About what?" Drew leaned back in his chair, staring at the star-filled void outside the ship's window. About where we're headed. I don't think Human Galactic Command has the whole story. I think we're being led into something bigger than we realize. Arlexa's eyes flickered to him, and for the first time in a while, she spoke with something resembling curiosity. Go on. Think about it, Drew continued. We're not the only ones after this tech. The Xylethan mercenaries were just a small part of a much larger operation. There's someone pulling their strings, someone who wants the tech for their own reasons. And I'm not sure the command is aware of how deep this runs. Arlexa nodded slowly, absorbing his words. You suspect there are others involved. I know there are, Drew said, turning his chair to face her. I've seen this kind of thing before. The mercenaries, the tech, the secret deals, it all adds up to something more. And I think we've just scratched the surface. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The ship hummed steadily as it glided through the dark, infinite space. Arlexa's thoughtful expression remained fixed on Drew, and he could almost hear her mind working. Finally, Arlexa stood up, her movements deliberate and confident. She crossed the room and stood beside Drew at the control panel, looking out into the vastness of space. I agree with you. There are too many moving parts in this, and I don't believe we're simply chasing down rogue mercenaries. There's something more at play here, but we need more information. Drew's gaze narrowed. So, what's our next move? Arlexa looked at him, her eyes cold but calculating. We find the people behind this. Whoever they are, whatever they want with the tech, we track them down. And we make sure it doesn't fall into their hands. Drew's heart raced with the thrill of the chase. For the first time, in a long time, he felt truly alive. The mission had changed from a simple retrieval operation into a dangerous game of cat and mouse, one that would take him and Arlexa to places they never expected. Sounds like a plan, Drew said, his voice firm. Arlexa gave him a brief nod. Then we move forward, together, a dangerous path ahead. Their first destination was a small, hidden planet located on the edge of known space. It was a place where criminals, outlaws, and shadowy figures often went to lay low. If anyone knew about the larger forces behind the mercenaries, it would be someone on that planet. The place was known as Korath, a world full of smuggler hideouts, underground black markets, and dangerous people. Drew had never been there, but he had heard enough rumors to know it was not a place anyone visited without good reason. The starlight approached the planet cautiously, entering the outer orbit with the usual skill and precision Drew had become known for. However, something felt different about this mission. It wasn't just the weight of the stolen tech. They were walking straight into the lion's den. And they both knew it. Stay sharp, Drew said to Arlexa, his voice steady but filled with tension. We don't know what we're walking into. Arlexa didn't reply. She had already checked her weapons, adjusted her gear, and was ready for whatever danger lay ahead. Drew admired that about her. Arlexa had been trained in the art of war from a young age. She wasn't just an ally. She was a soldier through and through. And now, Drew was beginning to see her not just as a partner, but as someone who had the skills to make him a better leader. As they descended toward the planet's surface, the dark, craggy landscape below came into view. The air was thick with the smell of dust and smoke, and the city in the distance looked more like a maze of broken buildings and rusted metal than any place that could be called home. They landed the starlight on the outskirts of the city, and Drew switched off the engine with a quiet hum. For a moment, neither of them moved. The silence was oppressive, and both of them knew that the next steps would be dangerous. Ready? Drew asked, turning to Arlexa. She gave him a brief glance, her eyes betraying nothing. Always. They exited the ship and stepped into the dimly lit streets of Korath. The city felt abandoned, but Drew could sense the presence of eyes watching them from the shadows. The people here were not kind, and they didn't take kindly to outsiders. As they walked deeper into the heart of the city, Drew kept his hand near his sidearm. Arlexa, on the other hand, walked with a confidence that made it clear she wasn't afraid of the dark corners or the dangerous figures lurking in them. The two of them made their way toward a seedy bar known for being a hub of information. It was the perfect place to find out more about the people who were pulling the strings behind the mercenaries. They were about to meet a man named Merrick, a former Zalathan military officer who had gone rogue. He was known to have connections to the black market and was rumored to have information about a secret organization operating across multiple systems. When they reached the bar, Drew pushed open the door. The air inside was thick with smoke, and the low murmur of voices filled the room. At the far end of the bar, they spotted Merrick, a tall, thin figure with dark hair and a cold expression. He was sitting in a corner booth, a drink in hand, waiting for them. Drew and Arlexa approached, and as they did, Merrick's eyes flickered toward them. His gaze was sharp, calculating, as though he already knew who they were. "You've been looking for answers," Merrick said in a low voice as they sat down. "I know why you're here." Drew didn't waste time with pleasantries. "We're here to find out who's behind the mercenaries, the ones who stole the tech, and we're willing to do whatever it takes to stop them." Merrick's lips twisted into a half-smile. "You're playing a dangerous game. You're not the only ones who want the tech, and the people you're after. They're far more powerful than you realize." Arlexa leaned in, her voice cold and steady. "Tell us everything you know." Merrick hesitated for a moment, then spoke in a quiet voice. "There's a faction within the Zalathan government that's pulling the strings. They'd been using mercenaries to infiltrate and steal technology across the galaxy. But they're not just after the tech. They're after something much bigger: control over the entire human frontier." Drew's mind raced as he processed this information. He had known this mission was more complicated than he realized, but now it seemed like the stakes were even higher than he thought. "We're not leaving until we have answers," Drew said firmly. Merrick's smile faded as he leaned back in his chair. "I think you're already too deep into this, but if you want to stop them, you'll need more than just bravery." Arlexa's gaze never wavered. "We'll do whatever it takes." Merrick nodded slowly. "Then I suggest you get ready for the fight of your lives." The words from Merrick, the rogue Zalathan officer, hung heavily in the air. They had thought they were chasing down a simple mercenary group. Instead, they had uncovered something far more dangerous: a covert faction within the Zalathan government, one that had its hands in everything, pulling strings across the galaxy. Now, Drew and Arlexa knew they weren't just fighting for survival. They were in the middle of a battle for the future of the human frontier, and they weren't going to back down. As they left the bar, Drew's mind was buzzing with thoughts. Merrick had given them a glimpse into something massive, something far beyond a simple mission for stolen tech. He had confirmed their suspicions. The Zalathan government wasn't just involved. They were orchestrating the thefts of the most advanced technology to consolidate power. And they wouldn't stop until they had control over everything. The wind outside the bar on Goreth was harsh, stinging their faces as Drew and Arlexa walked toward the ship. The dark streets around them seemed even more menacing now, filled with shadows that felt like they were closing in. Drew's hand instinctively went to the holster at his side, but he didn't need to draw his weapon yet. They weren't in immediate danger, but it was clear they were getting closer to the storm. "We need to find out everything we can about this faction," Drew said, glancing at Arlexa. "The Zalathans can't be the only ones involved. Whoever's working with them is just as dangerous." Arlexa nodded, her face as serious as ever. "We'll need allies. Merrick can only tell us so much. We need a bigger picture, more information about their plans. And we need to move fast." Drew was used to being on his own, but more and more, he was starting to see the value of having someone like Arlexa by his side. She wasn't just a warrior, she was a strategist. She thought several steps ahead, and her quiet confidence steadied him in ways he hadn't expected. As the two of them boarded the Starlight, Drew realized that they were in this together. They didn't have all the answers, but they had each other, and that was enough to take on whatever the galaxy threw at them. The plot unfolds. The next few days were a blur of planning and searching for leads. They set course for a remote part of space, hoping to find clues that would lead them to the heart of the Zillathan faction. The Zillathans were a secretive people, and their government had always been known for its deep layers of secrecy. Getting information out of them was like pulling teeth. But Drew and Arlexa weren't about to give up. Along the way, they gathered intel from several shady sources, smugglers, black market traders, and even a few disgruntled ex-soldiers who had defected from the Zillathan military. Each lead brought them closer to the truth, but the deeper they dug, the more dangerous things became. They learned that the faction within the Zillathan government wasn't just interested in technology. They wanted power, absolute power. And the stolen tech was just the beginning. If they were successful in their mission, they would have the resources to take control of entire star systems. The human frontier would be in their grasp, and there would be nothing anyone could do to stop them. Drew and Arlexa both knew that they couldn't allow this to happen. But how could they stop a powerful hidden faction that was already so deep into the galaxy's inner workings? The weight of the task ahead of them began to settle in. Their enemies weren't just mercenaries or pirates. These were government operatives, military commanders, spies, and diplomats. People who played the game on a much bigger scale than they had ever faced before. After days of planning, the two of them finally made a decision. They would head to Zillath Prime, the capital of the Zillathan Empire. It was a bold move, a dangerous one, but it was the only way to find the heart of the operation and destroy it once and for all. If they could infiltrate the heart of the Zillathan government, they might just be able to stop the faction before it could carry out its plans. It was a long shot, but it was their only shot. The journey to Zillath Prime was long and filled with tension. The Starlight had to take a circuitous route to avoid detection by the Zillathan fleet. Every jump through hyperspace brought them closer to the heart of enemy territory, and with each passing day, Drew felt the pressure mounting. When they finally arrived in orbit around Zillath Prime, Drew's heart pounded. The planet was a sprawling metropolis, with towering skyscrapers that seemed to scrape the sky itself. The Zillathan capital was known for its advanced technology, and Drew knew that getting onto the planet undetected would be no easy task. "Once we land, we'll have to move quickly," Arlexa said, her voice calm despite the danger. She had already mapped out their route, pinpointing the least guarded areas of the city where they could enter and move without being seen. Drew nodded, trying to focus his mind on the mission ahead. "What's the plan once we're inside?" "We find the faction's headquarters. If we can get access to their main communications hub, we might be able to uncover their plans, stop them before they can do any more damage," Arlexa explained, her sharp mind already anticipating the obstacles they'd face. "You're right," Drew said, his voice steady. "Let's do this." They made their descent toward the planet, slipping past the outer layers of Zillath Prime's defense grid. Drew expertly piloted the ship through the atmosphere, his eyes scanning the ground below as they approached the city. The streets were filled with the usual hustle and bustle of a capital city, but there was an undercurrent of tension in the air. The presence of the secret faction was everywhere, lurking in the background, their influence felt but unseen. Drew and Arlexa had to remain in the shadows, moving quickly and quietly to avoid detection. Their first task was to locate a safe house, a hidden location where they could regroup and plan their next move. They had to stay under the radar, avoiding the attention of Zillathan security forces and spies who might be watching. Once inside their safe house, Drew and Arlexa began to piece together the final pieces of the puzzle. They hacked into the city's network, gathering intel on the faction's movements, communications, and operations. Every piece of information they uncovered led them closer to the heart of the enemy. And then they found it, the headquarters of the faction. It was located in the heart of the city, hidden in plain sight within one of Zillath Prime's largest government buildings. "This is it," Drew said, his voice low but determined. "We have to get in there and destroy everything they've worked for." With their mission clear, Drew and Arlexa made their way to the headquarters. The building loomed in front of them, its sleek, glass exterior reflecting the light of Zalath Prime's twin suns. Security was tight, but they had a plan. Arlexa had prepared a distraction, a small explosion that would draw attention away from their entrance. They would slip in through the back, unnoticed. It was risky, it was dangerous, but it was their only chance. As the explosion went off in the distance, drawing guards away from their post, Drew and Arlexa made their move. They entered the building, their footsteps silent against the polished floors. They moved swiftly, taking out guards quietly as they went, their hearts pounding in their chests. There was no room for error. Finally, they reached the heart of the building, the control room, where the faction's leaders were operating. Inside, they found the group they had been hunting for. The men and women who had been pulling the strings, orchestrating the thefts, and plotting the takeover of the human frontier. It was time for the final showdown. Drew and Arlexa burst into the room, weapons raised. The leaders of the faction turned to face them, their eyes filled with shock and disbelief. "You're too late," one of them sneered. "We already control everything." Drew didn't hesitate. Not for long. The battle was fierce. The Xylathan soldiers fought with everything they had, but Drew and Arlexa were ready. Together, they fought through the room, taking down enemies one by one. The sound of blaster fire echoed through the hall, and the air was thick with tension. But Drew and Arlexa's bond was stronger than ever. They moved in perfect sync, covering each other's backs, fighting like a single unit. In the end, it was over. The leaders of the faction were defeated, their plans shattered. Zalath Prime was safe for now. Drew and Arlexa had won. A new dawn. As they stood in the wreckage of the faction's headquarters, the weight of their victory began to sink in. They had stopped a powerful force from taking control of the galaxy. But they knew the war was far from over. There would always be more enemies, more challenges, more dangers lurking in the shadows. The journey to Zalath Prime was long and filled with tension. The Starlight had to take a circuitous route to avoid detection by the Xylathan fleet. Every jump through hyperspace brought them closer to the heart of enemy territory, and with each passing day, Drew felt the pressure mounting. When they finally arrived in orbit around Zalath Prime, Drew's heart pounded. The planet was a sprawling metropolis, with towering skyscrapers that seemed to scrape the sky itself. The Xylathan capital was known for its advanced technology, and Drew knew that getting onto the planet undetected would be no easy task. "Once we land, we'll have to move quickly," Arlexa said, her voice calm despite the danger. She had already mapped out their route, pinpointing the least guarded areas of the city where they could enter and move without being seen. Drew nodded, trying to focus his mind on the mission ahead. "What's the plan once we're inside?" "We find the faction's headquarters. If we can get access to their main communications hub, we might be able to uncover their plans, stop them before they can do any more damage," Arlexa explained, her sharp mind already anticipating the obstacles they'd face. "You're right," Drew said, his voice steady. "Let's do this." They made their descent toward the planet, slipping past the outer layers of Zalath Prime's defense grid. Drew expertly piloted the ship through the atmosphere, his eyes scanning the ground below as they approached the city. The streets were filled with the usual hustle and bustle of a capital city, but there was an undercurrent of tension in the air. The presence of the secret faction was everywhere, lurking in the background, their influence felt but unseen. Drew and Arlexa had to remain in the shadows, moving quickly and quietly to avoid detection. Their first task was to locate a safe house, a hidden location where they could regroup and plan their next move. They had to stay under the radar, avoiding the attention of Xylathan security forces and spies who might be watching. Once inside their safe house, Drew and Arlexa began to piece together the final pieces of the puzzle. They hacked into the city's network, gathering intel on the faction's movements, communications, and operations. Every piece of information they uncovered led them closer to the heart of the enemy. And then they found it, the headquarters of the faction. It was located in the heart of the city, hidden in plain sight within one of Zilaf Prime's largest government buildings. "This is it," Drew said, his voice low but determined. "We have to get in there and destroy everything they've worked for." With their mission clear, Drew and Arlexa made their way to the headquarters. The building loomed in front of them, its sleek, glass exterior reflecting the light of Zilaf Prime's twin suns. Security was tight, but they had a plan. Arlexa had prepared a distraction, a small explosion that would draw attention away from their entrance. They would slip in through the back, unnoticed. It was risky, it was dangerous, but it was their only chance. As the explosion went off in the distance, drawing guards away from their post, Drew and Arlexa made their move. They entered the building, their footsteps silent against the polished floors. They moved swiftly, taking out guards quietly as they went, their hearts pounding in their chests. There was no room for error. Finally, they reached the heart of the building, the control room, where the faction's leaders were operating. Inside, they found the group they had been hunting for. The men and women who had been pulling the strings, orchestrating the thefts, and plotting the takeover of the human frontier. It was time for the final showdown. Drew and Arlexa burst into the room, weapons raised. The leaders of the faction turned to face them, their eyes filled with shock and disbelief. "You're too late," one of them sneered. "We already control everything." Drew didn't hesitate. Not for long. The battle was fierce. The Xylathan soldiers fought with everything they had, but Drew and Arlexa were ready. Together, they fought through the room, taking down enemies one by one. The sound of blaster fire echoed through the hall, and the air was thick with tension. But Drew and Arlexa's bond was stronger than ever. They moved in perfect sync, covering each other's backs, fighting like a single unit. In the end, it was over. The leaders of the faction were defeated, their plans shattered. Zilaf Prime was safe for now. Drew and Arlexa had won. A new dawn. As they stood in the wreckage of the faction's headquarters, the weight of their victory began to sink in. They had stopped a powerful force from taking control of the galaxy. But they knew the war was far from over. There would always be more enemies, more challenges, more dangers lurking in the shadows. Arlexa's contact, a shady character by the name of Ryan, lived in the seedy underbelly of a city on a distant planet called HFY. It was a place known for its criminal activities and dangerous gangs. Ryan was an expert in black market dealings, and he had connections that could get them access to the highest levels of illegal trade. He wasn't someone to trust lightly, but in their line of work, sometimes the only choice was to work with people who had their own agendas. The Starlight made its way through the galaxy once again, this time heading toward HFY. The journey was uneventful, but the air between Drew and Arlexa was thick with anticipation. They both knew this could be their only chance to find out more about their true enemy. When they finally arrived at HFY, the planet greeted them with its usual grim atmosphere, dark skies, a constant drizzle, and a feeling of danger at every turn. They landed in the heart of the city, where the streets were filled with people hustling to make their next illegal deal. Drew felt an odd sense of discomfort, as if every corner they turned could lead them into a trap. Arlexa led the way through the winding streets, her eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. Drew kept his hand close to his sidearm. They both knew this was a dangerous place, and there were plenty of people here who would sell them out in a heartbeat for the right price. They finally reached an old warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Inside, Ryan was waiting for them, sitting at a table surrounded by stacks of crates. His face was hidden in the shadows, but his sharp eyes glinted in the dim light. "Arlexa," Ryan greeted her with a smirk. "I wasn't expecting to see you here." Arlexa didn't waste time on pleasantries. "We need information. Now." Ryan raised an eyebrow. Always so direct. "What is it this time?" "We're looking for the person behind the stolen tech deals. We need to know who's pulling the strings." Drew interjected, his voice steady. Ryan's eyes flickered between the two of them, assessing. You two really don't know when to stop, do you? He leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying the game. All right, I know who you're after, but you'll need to pay the price. Arlexa's eyes hardened. You know we don't have time for games, Ryan. Tell us what you know, or we walk. Ryan studied her for a moment, then sighed. Fine, fine. You're looking for Laren Voss, the leader of the Black Sun Syndicate. He's the one who's been moving the tech, and he's got his hands in every illegal operation across the galaxy. If you want to stop him, you'll need to go after him directly. But be warned, he's not someone you want to mess with. Drew's mind raced as he processed the name. Laren Voss. He'd heard of him before. A criminal mastermind with connections in every corner of the galaxy. But why would someone like him be involved in stealing technology? What was his endgame? Arlexa turned to Drew. This is it. We're getting closer. Drew nodded, his eyes cold. No more tricks. This ends now. The final chase. With Ryan's information in hand, Drew and Arlexa set their course for the heart of the Black Sun Syndicate. They knew it wouldn't be easy. The Syndicate was well guarded, and Laren Voss was known for his ruthlessness. But they also knew that they couldn't stop now. The stakes had grown higher than ever, and they were the only ones who could stop the galaxy from falling into chaos. As they prepared for their final confrontation, Drew glanced at Arlexa. Their bond had grown stronger over the course of this mission, and now they were both more determined than ever. They had no choice but to keep pushing forward, no matter what it took. The time for tricks was over. The real battle was about to begin.